The space shuttle landed at Boston International Spaceport with a gentle thud. Zalorak clutched his datapad tightly, 4 of his 6 fingers turning pale blue from the pressure. Through the viewport, he could see the human welcoming committee, waiting on the landing pad. They looked so soft, so fragile in their colorful clothing without armor or visible weapons. How had such creatures survived, let alone reached the stars? Zalorak stood 7 feet tall, his scaled skin shimmering purple in the artificial light of the shuttle. As the youngest scholar chosen from the Praxian Dominion for this exchange program, he felt the weight of his empire's expectations. His mission was simple: study the humans, understand their weaknesses, and report back to the High Command. Final approach complete. "Welcome to Earth, honored delegates," announced the human pilot through the speaker system. "Please remain seated until the decontamination process finishes." Zalorak snorted softly. Even their safety protocols seemed excessive and soft. On his homeworld, exposure to new pathogens was considered a test of biological fitness. Those who survived were worthy. Those who didn't were not. Simple, efficient, and natural. After the airlock doors opened, Zalorak followed the other 5 alien delegates down the ramp. Each represented a different galactic power, but none looked as physically imposing as the Praxians. The gravity felt slightly stronger than the shuttle had prepared him for, but he refused to show any sign of discomfort. A human woman stepped forward, her face arranged in what Zalorak had learned was called a smile, a supposedly non-threatening facial gesture that nevertheless displayed their bone structure in a primal way. "Welcome to Harvard University's Interstellar Exchange Initiative. I'm Professor Linda Bailey, your program coordinator." She placed her hands together in front of her body. "We're honored to host the first ever educational exchange between our worlds." Zalorak towered over the professor, looking down at her with his large golden eyes. "I am Scholar Zalorak, 3rd rank, of the Imperial Praxian Academy. I come seeking knowledge." He deliberately left out the customary Praxian greeting that would have included a threat assessment of her combat capabilities. Apparently humans found such things offensive. Professor Bailey led them into a large building with high ceilings. "This is Adam's house, where you'll be staying during your semester on Earth. Each of you will share quarters with a human student to facilitate cultural exchange." This was unexpected. Zalorak had assumed he would be housed with the other delegates. The thought of sharing living space with a human made his scales itch. How would he complete his research with a human watching him constantly? They entered a common area where a group of humans waited. Professor Bailey consulted her tablet. "Scholar Zalorak, you'll be rooming with Eric Lambert, a senior studying comparative xenopolitics." A young human male with short brown hair stepped forward. He was tall for a human, but still several inches shorter than Zalorak. His body appeared weak and unsuited for combat, lacking both the protective scales of Praxians and any visible muscle definition that would indicate strength. "Hey there," Eric said, extending his hand. "Great to meet you." Zalorak stared at the outstretched hand, recalling his cultural briefing. This was a handshake, a primitive greeting ritual that originally served to prove neither party was carrying weapons. Reluctantly, he extended his own scaled hand, careful not to squeeze too firmly with his superior strength. "Your accommodations are adequate," Zalorak stated, looking around the common area. The other delegates were similarly meeting their human roommates with varying degrees of awkwardness. Eric laughed. "That's the spirit. Come on, I'll show you our room and help you get settled." Their shared living space was small by Praxian standards, but had separate sleeping areas. Eric helped Zalorak place his few possessions in the storage units, chattering constantly about campus life, classes, and something called college football that seemed to involve territorial combat without actual weapons. "The orientation session starts in an hour," Eric said. "But first, any questions about Earth or humans I can answer for you? This must all seem pretty weird." Zalorak considered the question. "Your species has achieved space travel and basic genetic engineering? Yet you have not conquered your own planet fully. There are still separate nations. This is inefficient." Eric's face did the smiling thing again. We prefer cooperation over conquest when possible. Different perspectives make us stronger as a whole. A curious philosophy, Zalorak noted, filing away this information. Such thinking would be considered dangerous heresy on his homeworld. Division meant weakness. Unity through force meant strength. These were fundamental Praxian truths. Later, in the university's grand hall, Professor Bailey addressed all the exchange students. The room was filled with humans and aliens of various species, all seated in concentric rings facing a central platform. Your main assignment this semester will be a research project on comparative cultural values, she explained. You'll each choose an aspect of human society to study in depth. Comparing it to your own cultural framework, Zalorak immediately knew his topic. Warfare. Humans had a fascinating history of conflict, yet had somehow avoided destroying themselves despite possessing nuclear weapons for centuries. Understanding their military weaknesses would be valuable information for the Dominion. After the orientation, the students mingled over refreshments. Zalorak observed the casual way humans interacted with each other and the other aliens, lacking the formal hierarchy and threat displays common to Praxian gatherings. So, decided on your research topic? Eric asked, approaching with 2 drinks. He offered one to Zalorak. I will study human warfare and conflict resolution, Zalorak replied, accepting the drink cautiously and scanning it with his portable toxin detector disguised as a decorative wristband. Your species' approach to combat and conquest puzzles me. Interesting choice, Eric said, seeming amused rather than offended. The university archives have extensive military history records. I can help you gain access. You would assist me in studying your weaknesses? Zalorak asked, genuinely confused. Eric laughed. We don't see sharing knowledge as revealing weaknesses. Besides, there might be more to human military history than you expect. The next morning, Zalorak began his research in the university's digital archives. The amount of information humans had preserved about their own conflicts was astonishing. Praxian history recorded only victories, erasing defeats as if they had never happened. He read about something called the Geneva Conventions, with growing confusion. Rules for warfare, protections for prisoners, treatment of civilian populations. These concepts had no equivalent in Praxian military doctrine. Finding everything okay? A voice asked. Zalorak looked up to see another human, an older male with white hair wearing the insignia of the archive staff. These documents describe limitations humans place on themselves during conflict, Zalorak said. Why would any species deliberately restrict its combat effectiveness? The archivist considered the question thoughtfully. Because we learned that how you fight matters as much as whether you win. Some victories cost too much if they destroy what you were fighting for in the first place. Zalorak's golden eyes blinked slowly as he processed this strange idea. It contradicted everything he had been taught about the natural order of things. In the grand arena of galactic power, there were only predators and prey. Humans, with their self-imposed limitations, should have been easy conquests for more ruthless species. Yet here they were, spreading throughout their solar system, making allies rather than subjects, building rather than subjugating. It made no logical sense. Zalorak continued reading, looking for the hidden strength that must explain humanity's survival. There had to be something more to these soft, strange creatures than what he could see on the surface. Perhaps this educational exchange would prove more valuable than the High Command had anticipated. 2 weeks into his stay on Earth, Zalorak found himself in the Harvard Military History Wing, surrounded by glass cases displaying weapons from various periods of human history. The evolution from simple spears to nuclear warheads fascinated him. What troubled him more was the evidence that humans had possessed planet-killing weapons for centuries, yet their world still stood. Finding what you're looking for? Eric asked, appearing beside him. Zalorak had grown accustomed to his roommate's habit of showing up unexpectedly. Your species developed nuclear weapons in the primitive atomic age, Zalorak said, pointing to a model of an early bomb. Yet you used them only twice in actual warfare. This defies logic. Eric's expression grew serious. Those 2 uses were enough to show us what they could do. Sometimes seeing the horror of a weapon makes you reluctant to use it again. Zelorak's neck frills twitched in confusion. On my world, a weapon exists to be used, creating a superior method of destroying enemies than choosing not to employ it. This is not a concept we have. Maybe that's why Professor Bailey wanted us to study each other, Eric suggested. Different perspectives, you know. Later that day, Zelorak attended a lecture on human military history given by Professor Bailey. She showed images of devastated cities from various human conflicts. Throughout our history, humans have continuously developed more efficient ways to destroy each other, she explained. But alongside this destructive capacity grew a parallel understanding. That restraint could be more powerful than force. Zelorak raised one of his forearms, the traditional Praxian way of challenging a statement. Respectfully, Professor, restraint is viewed as weakness in many galactic cultures. How did humans avoid being conquered by more aggressive species? During their vulnerable development periods? The professor smiled. An excellent question. I've arranged for someone who might help answer that tomorrow. Colonel Frank Winters will be visiting our class. He's retired from active military service but now teaches strategic theory. The next day, a tall human male with close-cropped gray hair and perfect posture stood before the class. His body, while still soft by Praxian standards, showed more signs of physical conditioning than most humans Zelorak had encountered. So you want to know why humans don't go full force in warfare? Colonel Winters began, looking directly at Zelorak. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. We choose not to. The colonel activated a holographic display showing Earth's current military capabilities. The numbers of warheads, biological agents, and autonomous weapon systems were far greater than what appeared in public galactic records. What you're seeing is only what's declassified, the colonel continued. The point isn't to scare you. The point is that strength isn't always about what you do. Sometimes it's about what you choose not to do. Zelorak's scales rippled in disbelief. But your military budget is smaller than many planets half your size. Your forces are spread thin across your solar system. Because we learned something, Colonel Winters said. Total war creates total enemies. Limited war leaves room for future peace. We fight when necessary, but we always leave a path back to diplomacy. After class, Zelorak requested access to human military training simulations. Professor Bailey granted him limited clearance to observe a naval exercise being conducted in Earth's orbit. Zelorak watched from a view screen as human ships practiced maneuvers against drone targets. What struck him was how the ships frequently held position when they could have pressed an advantage, how they targeted propulsion systems rather than life support. Why do they not strike at the critical systems? He asked the observation deck officer, a woman named Samantha Reed with the rank of lieutenant. Because in a real conflict, that ship would contain people, she explained. The goal is neutralizing the threat, not maximizing casualties. But the most efficient path to victory isn't always the best path, Lieutenant Reed interrupted, especially if you want peace afterward. Later that evening, Zelorak found himself unable to sleep. His research was troubling him deeply. Everything he had been taught about power, about survival of the strongest, seemed contradicted by human history. They should have destroyed themselves or been conquered long ago, yet here they were, expanding into the stars. He decided to walk through the campus gardens to clear his thoughts. The night air was cool against his scales. He found Eric sitting on a bench looking up at the stars. Your Lieutenant Reed said something strange today, Zelorak said without greeting. She implied that peace was more valuable than complete victory. Eric nodded. That's pretty standard human thinking these days. It wasn't always that way. In my culture, showing mercy to an enemy is considered an insult to their warrior spirit and a failure of your duty, Zelorak explained. It suggests they are not worthy of your full effort. That's an interesting perspective, Eric said. Here's another way to think about it. It takes more strength to spare an enemy than to destroy them. Any angry child can break a toy, but only wisdom can know when not to break things. Zelorak considered this. You speak as if enemies are toys. Bad analogy, sorry, Eric admitted. The point is, most species figure out how to destroy others pretty early in their development. It's not that special. but figuring out when not. 2, that's rare. The next day, Zalorak discovered something that disturbed him even more. In the classified sections Professor Bailey had granted him access to, he found records of human humanitarian missions to planets they had previously been at war with. He watched footage of human medical ships arriving at a Centaurian colony that had attacked Earth settlements just years earlier. The humans were providing food, medicine, and engineering expertise to rebuild damaged infrastructure. Zalorak couldn't understand this. The Centaurians had been defeated but not conquered. By Praxian standards, they deserved to suffer the consequences of their failed aggression. Yet here were humans, expending resources to help them recover. He brought this footage to Professor Bailey. "Is this propaganda?" he asked bluntly. "A deception to appear benevolent?" She looked surprised. "No, it's standard post-conflict restoration. We found that helping former enemies rebuild tends to prevent future conflicts." "But you gain nothing from this," Zalorak insisted. "We gain peace," she replied simply, "and stable trading partners eventually. Violence is expensive, Zalorak. Peace is profitable in the long run." That night, Zalorak sent a secure message to his academic supervisors on the Praxian homeworld. His preliminary findings suggested that human military doctrine was far more complex than previously believed. Their apparent weakness, their reluctance to use maximum force, might not be weakness at all, but a different kind of strength they didn't yet understand. The response came quickly. "Continue research. Focus on exploitable weaknesses, not philosophical curiosities." Zalorak stared at the message for a long time. For the first time in his life, he wondered if his people's understanding of strength and weakness might be incomplete. 3 months into his research, Zalorak had gathered enough data to write an initial report. He sat in the university library, organizing his findings when emergency alerts began flashing across all screens. The peaceful routine of campus life shattered as students gathered around news displays. "Breaking news from Mars colony," announced the reporter. "Kaldorian extremists have attacked the Olympus Mons research station. Early reports indicate at least 200 human casualties." Images showed the burning remains of what had been a civilian science facility. Bodies lay scattered among the wreckage. Zalorak watched as Eric's face went pale with shock. "Do you know anyone there?" Zalorak asked. Eric nodded slowly. "My cousin worked in the geology department." His voice cracked. "She just sent me pictures of her new baby last week." Zalorak felt an unexpected sensation in his chest. On his world, the death of a relative in battle was cause for celebration of their warrior spirit. Yet seeing Eric's pain stirred something unfamiliar in him. Over the next hours, the university became a center of activity. Students with family on Mars gathered in common areas, waiting for news. The Kaldorian exchange student was quickly moved to a secure location for his protection, though no humans had threatened him. Professor Bailey called an emergency meeting of all exchange students. "I understand this is a difficult time," she said. "Some of you may feel uncomfortable remaining on Earth during this crisis. We've arranged for transport ships if any of you wish to return to your homeworlds." The Kaldorian representative, Mokhtar, stood up. "I condemn these actions and wish to remain," he said. "The attackers are radicals who do not represent our government." Zalorak watched the humans in the room carefully. There were tears, anger, but no calls for Mokhtar's blood. This surprised him. On Praxia, the families of the dead would have demanded revenge against any available representative of the enemy species. That evening, Zalorak observed something even more unexpected. The university president held a campus-wide memorial service for the Mars victims. After honoring the dead, she called for restraint and understanding. "In times like these, we must remember what separates us from those who attack innocents," she said. "We seek justice, not vengeance. We will not allow this tragedy to push us into indiscriminate hatred." Zalorak couldn't believe what he was hearing. The humans had suffered an unprovoked attack, and their leaders were calling for restraint. In Praxian culture, such an attack would have been answered with overwhelming force, preferably against Kaldorian civilian targets to maximize terror. The Next day, Zalorak observed the human military response unfold. Warships mobilized, but they moved into defensive positions rather than launching an immediate counterattack. Diplomatic channels remained open. The United Nations Security Council met an emergency session, with the Kaldorian ambassador present. They invite the enemy to speak? Zalorak asked Professor Bailey in disbelief. After such an attack? The Kaldorian central government claims they did not authorize the attack, she explained. We're giving them an opportunity to prove it by helping us identify and neutralize the responsible faction. This is not what I expected, Zalorak admitted. What did you expect? On my world, we would have already launched planetary strikes against major Kaldorian cities. Fear would prevent future attacks. Professor Bailey looked at him steadily. And how many innocent Kaldorians would die in those strikes? Irrelevant, Zalorak replied automatically, then paused. That is, casualties would be considered an acceptable cost of maintaining security and honor. We tried that approach in our history, she said. It created cycles of violence that lasted centuries. 3 days after the attack, human forces moved. Zalorak watched the news broadcasts with Eric and other students. Precision strikes targeted only the extremist group's bases. Advanced human ships easily penetrated Kaldorian defenses, but instead of bombarding from orbit, they deployed ground forces to capture the leaders responsible. They risked their soldiers to capture rather than kill from safety? Zalorak asked, genuinely puzzled. We want justice, Eric explained, his eyes fixed on the screen. That means trials, evidence, and punishment of the guilty, not mass deaths of innocent Kaldorians. The operation was successful. The extremist leaders were captured with minimal casualties on both sides. What happened next shocked Zalorak even more. The human forces discovered children in the extremist compound, offspring of the attackers. According to all military logic Zalorak understood, these young Kaldorians should have been eliminated as future threats. Instead, the human soldiers evacuated them to safety. When footage showed human medics treating injured Kaldorian children, Zalorak could no longer remain silent. This defies all rational military doctrine, he said to Eric. These offspring will grow to become enemies. Their proper treatment should be clear. Eric turned to him, anger flashing in his eyes for the first time since they'd met. Their proper treatment? They're children, Zalorak. They didn't choose this fight. On my world? We're not on your world, Eric snapped. And thank God for that if you think murdering kids is acceptable military strategy. Zalorak fell silent, his neck frills flattening in discomfort. He had clearly offended Eric deeply, though he didn't fully understand why. He decided to consult Colonel Winters, who might explain the military reasoning behind these confusing actions. He found the colonel in his office, monitoring the ongoing operation. Colonel, I seek understanding, Zalorak said. Your forces show tremendous restraint. You had the capability to destroy the entire Kaldorian settlement from orbit, yet you risked your soldiers to minimize enemy casualties. From a military perspective, this seems inefficient. Colonel Winters looked up from his screens. Efficiency isn't our only concern, Zalorak. What message does it send to the galaxy if we respond to the killing of innocents by killing more innocents? It would show strength, Zalorak suggested. Would it? The colonel stood and walked to a window overlooking the campus. Let me ask you something. What do you think would happen if we glassed a Kaldorian city in retaliation? Zalorak considered. Other species would fear human military power. They would be less likely to attack in the future. Maybe. Or maybe they'd see us as dangerous butchers who need to be contained. Maybe moderate Kaldorians would become extremists, seeking revenge for their families. Maybe we'd create 1,000 new enemies for each one we killed. The colonel turned to face him. Sometimes the strongest move isn't the most violent one. As Zalorak left the colonel's office, he passed the memorial wall where photos of the Mars victims were displayed. He stopped, looking at their faces. Researchers, engineers, teachers. He thought about Eric's cousin and her baby. For the first time, he wondered what his own people might look like on such a wall, if humans ever decided that mercy was no longer the correct strategy. A week after the Kaldorian attack, Zelorak sat alone in his room surrounded by data screens. His research had taken a new direction. The Mars incident had provided real-time evidence of human military doctrine in action. But instead of revealing weakness as he had expected, it had shown something more complex. His door chimed. "Enter," he called. Eric stepped in, looking tired. The past week had been hard on him. The news had confirmed his cousin was among those killed on Mars. "Professor Bailey asked me to check on you," Eric said. "You've missed the last 2 classes." Zelorak's neck frills rippled with embarrassment. "I have been focused on my research. Recent events have complicated my understanding." Eric sat on the edge of his bed. "How so?" "I was taught that mercy is weakness," Zelorak explained. "That the strong survive by eliminating threats completely. But humans had the power to destroy the Kaldorian homeworld in retaliation, and chose not to. This contradicts everything I know about successful species. And yet here we are exploring the stars," Eric said with a small smile. "Maybe your understanding of successful needs updating." Zelorak clicked his mandibles in the Praxian expression of thoughtful consideration. "Perhaps. I have been reviewing human history more carefully. Your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yes?" Eric nodded. "The world wars, the Cold War, the resource conflicts, we came close. But each time you pulled back from the brink," Zelorak observed. "You developed weapons you chose not to use. You created rules for war that limited your own actions. These choices appear in my culture as signs of weakness, yet they have allowed you to advance technologically without extinction." "It wasn't always this way," Eric said. "We learned the hard way. Millions died before we figured it out." Zelorak stood suddenly. "I must rewrite my thesis entirely. The semester presentation is in 2 weeks, and my previous conclusions are inadequate." Over the next days, Zelorak worked tirelessly. He interviewed more humans, including military personnel, diplomats, and historians. He requested access to additional archives about Earth's most destructive conflicts and how they were resolved. "Professor," Bailey found him in the library late one evening, surrounded by historical texts. "You've been busy," she observed. "Professor, I have a question that troubles me," Zelorak said. "In your Cold War, 2 human powers had enough nuclear weapons to destroy your entire civilization, yet neither launched a first strike. Why?" "That's a complex question," she replied. "Fear of mutual destruction was part of it. But I think what really saved us was that on both sides, there were people who couldn't bring themselves to push the button. Even with all the political differences, there was still some recognition of shared humanity." "Shared humanity," Zelorak repeated, "a concept we have no equivalent for. Praxians are taught that hesitation to destroy an enemy is failure." Professor Bailey's expression grew serious. "And what do you think now?" Zelorak was silent for a long moment. "I think that my people may be wrong. Not just about humans, but about strength itself." The day before the semester presentations, Zelorak received a message from the Praxian High Command. They had been monitoring news about the Mars attack and demanded an immediate report on human military response, focusing on observable weaknesses for potential future exploitation. Zelorak stared at the message for a long time. For the first time in his life, he considered the possibility of disobedience. His research had led him to conclusions the High Command would not welcome. They expected tales of human frailty, not strength. The next day, delegates from various galactic powers gathered for the exchange students' presentations. Among them was the Praxian ambassador Krell, a decorated war veteran with deep purple scales that signified his high rank. His presence was unexpected and made Zelorak's scales tighten with anxiety. When it was his turn to present, Zelorak stepped onto the platform. He saw Eric and Professor Bailey watching from the audience. Behind them sat Colonel Winters, his face unreadable. "My research topic was human warfare," Zelorak began. "I came expecting to document weakness. I found something else entirely." He activated the display screen, showing images of Earth's most devastating weapons alongside pictures of peace treaties and humanitarian missions. Humans avoid total war not out of weakness, but mercy. And this mercy is what makes them potentially the most dangerous species in the galaxy. A murmur ran through the audience. Ambassador Krell's neck frills flared in what Zelorak recognized as anger. The typical galactic understanding of strength is limited, Zelorak continued. Many species, including my own, believe that maximum force applied without hesitation represents true power. By this measure, humans appear weak. They possess the capability to destroy enemies completely yet choose restraint. He displayed data, comparing Earth's military capabilities with their actual usage throughout history. But this restraint is not weakness, it is a different kind of strength. Humans learned what my people have not, that destroying an enemy creates new enemies while mercy can transform enemies into allies. Ambassador Krell stood abruptly. This is treason against Praxian doctrine, he declared. Scholar Zelorak, you forget yourself. Zelorak's scales rippled with fear, but he continued. I have not forgotten my training, Ambassador. I have expanded upon it. My research shows that human civilization has advanced precisely because they limit their own destructive potential. They are soft, Krell insisted. They spare enemies who would not spare them. They are wise, Zelorak countered. They understand, something we do not, that constant warfare leads to eventual extinction, while cooperation leads to expansion. He showed simulations he had created using military strategy programs. My analysis suggests that human restraint is an evolutionary adaptation. Species that destroy all opposition eventually face resource depletion or united resistance from others. Species that build alliances, even with former enemies, gain access to shared resources and knowledge. Enough, Krell growled. You will return to Praxia immediately for retraining. Professor Bailey stood. Ambassador, with respect, Scholar Zelorak has the right to complete his presentation. Academic freedom is a core value of this exchange program. Krell's eyes narrowed, but he sat back down. Zelorak continued, showing footage from the recent Kaldorian crisis. Observe how humans responded to attack. They had the power to destroy the entire Kaldorian species in retaliation. Instead, they targeted only those responsible, minimizing civilian casualties. He concluded with a final slide. Human mercy is not a flaw in their evolution. It is their greatest innovation. A recognition that lasting power comes not from destruction but from connection. The most terrifying thing about humans is not that they might destroy us, but that they might choose not to when they have every reason to do so. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Eric began to applaud, followed by Professor Bailey, and slowly others joined in. Ambassador Krell remained seated, his expression dark. As Zelorak left the platform, he knew his life had changed forever. He could never return to Praxia as the same person who had left it. He had come to study human weakness, but had instead discovered his own. After the presentation, Zelorak found himself at the center of a diplomatic storm. News of his thesis spread quickly throughout the galactic community. Many species dismissed his findings as naive, while others began quiet reassessments of human potential. Ambassador Krell had departed Earth immediately after the symposium, leaving without speaking to Zelorak. The message was clear. He was now considered a problem for the Praxian leadership. You should know that your presentation has caused quite a stir, Professor Bailey told him during their final meeting. We've received inquiries from 17 different species asking for copies of your research. Zelorak's scales shifted to a lighter shade, indicating surprise. I did not expect this level of interest. Neither did we, she admitted. Your perspective as a Praxian questioning your own cultural assumptions about strength gives your conclusions particular weight. Many dismissed human restraint as weakness until you suggested otherwise. That evening, Zelorak received an official communication from the Praxian Academy. His academic standing had been revoked. He was declared a corrupted scholar and ordered to return to Praxia for mental realignment. The punishment was severe but not unexpected. Eric found him staring at the message in their room. "Bad news from home? I am no longer welcome there," Zalorak said simply. "My findings are considered dangerous to Praxian values." Eric sat across from him. "I'm sorry. That's a high price to pay for honest research." "Perhaps," Zalorak agreed. "But I begin to think the price of believing a lie is higher." As the exchange program neared its end, Zalorak faced a difficult choice. Returning to Praxia meant facing punishment and having his research suppressed. Seeking asylum elsewhere would brand him a traitor permanently. His decision was complicated by an unexpected message from a junior member of the Praxian diplomatic corps named Vex. She requested a private meeting at a small cafe near campus. Vex was younger than Zalorak, her scales still bright with youth. "I read your research," she said without greeting when he joined her. "It has been classified as forbidden knowledge on Praxia, but some of us managed to access it anyway." "You risk much by meeting me," Zalorak noted. "As do you by continuing to speak truth," she replied. "What you may not know is that your words have found listeners among the younger generation. Many of us have questioned the endless cycle of conquest and dominance that has defined our people." She leaned closer. "A movement is growing, Zalorak. Small now, but gaining support. We believe the Praxian obsession with displaying strength through violence has limited our development as a species." Zalorak felt his heart race. "You speak dangerous words." "I speak necessary words," Vex countered. "Our culture celebrates conquest above all else, yet we have made little technological or social progress in 3 centuries. Meanwhile, humans advanced from primitive planetary civilization to interstellar power in the same period. Your research helps explain why." Before departing, Vex gave him a data crystal. "Whatever you decide about your future, know that your work matters. It may take generations, but Praxia will eventually need to confront these truths." On the final day of the exchange program, the students gathered for a farewell ceremony. The Taasits event was more subdued than planned due to the recent Mars attack, but Professor Bailey insisted on maintaining the tradition. "Cultural exchange is most vital during difficult times," she told the assembled students. "Understanding each other becomes more important, not less, when tensions rise." After the ceremony, Colonel Winters approached Zalorak. "I hear you've received some unwelcome news from your homeworld." "Yes. My conclusions were not well received." The colonel nodded. "Earth has offered asylum to several academic refugees in similar situations. If you're interested, I could make inquiries." Zalorak was surprised by the offer. Why would humans help someone from a potentially hostile species? "Because ideas matter," the colonel said simply. "And sometimes protecting a person who speaks. Truth is the best defense against those who prefer comfortable lies." Later that evening, Eric helped Zalorak pack his few belongings. "Have you decided what you'll do?" "I cannot return to Praxia," Zalorak admitted. "Not now. Perhaps never. But I believe my research must continue. The relationship between mercy and strength deserves deeper study." "You could stay on Earth," Eric suggested. "Several universities would welcome you, I'm sure." Zalorak considered this. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I should travel, observe other species' approaches to conflict. My perspective is still limited by my experiences." The next morning, representatives from various worlds prepared to board their ships home. Zalorak stood apart, watching. Professor Bailey approached him. "I've been authorized to offer you a research position here at Harvard. We would value your unique perspective on interspecies relations." "I am honored," Zalorak replied. "But I have another path in mind, if you will support it." He explained his plan: to continue his research while traveling to other worlds, documenting various approaches to conflict resolution across species. His goal was to create a comprehensive analysis of how different cultures balanced power and restraint. "An ambitious project," Professor Bailey said. "What will you do with these findings?" "Share them," Zalorak said simply. "With humans, with Praxians, with anyone who will listen. I believe there is a pattern to be found. Species that survive. Long-term are those that evolve beyond seeing mercy as weakness. The professor smiled. That sounds like important work. Harvard would be proud to sponsor such research. As Zalorak prepared to board a transport ship bound for the Galactic Commons, Eric came to say goodbye. Will you be okay out there? The Praxian government might not give up on you easily. I will be cautious, Zalorak promised. But some truths must be spoken, regardless of risk. He extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship he had once found so strange. Eric shook it firmly. I never expected to learn so much from my alien roommate. Nor I from mine, Zalorak admitted. Humans taught me that questioning one's own assumptions is not weakness but wisdom. From the viewport of the departing ship, Zalorak watched Earth grow smaller. He had arrived believing humans avoided total war because they lacked the strength or will to fight properly. He left understanding that mercy required more courage than destruction ever had. In his personal log that night, he wrote, "The most frightening truth about humans is not their capacity for violence, which many species share. It is their capacity for mercy, which few do. They possess the power to destroy worlds but choose repeatedly not to use it. This restraint is not a flaw in their nature but its highest expression. If other species, including my own, cannot learn this lesson, we may find ourselves extinct while humans continue to thrive among the stars. Not because they conquered us, but because we destroyed ourselves while they watched with pity, waiting for us to understand what they learned long ago. That true strength lies not in the ability to take life, but in the wisdom to preserve it."